right, today we are learning about the quadratic formula. So we're looking at quadratic functions. The quadratic formula is the answer to all of your problems. And so when I say that, I mean that any quadratic you have, if you can put it in this format of a times x squared plus b times x plus c, then you can plug numbers into the quadratic formula and it will give you your solutions. So just a reminder on that it has to be in the format of y or f of x. A lot of times you'll see it just as f of x equals the a value times x squared plus b times x plus c. And so that means if you end up with a negative, then the number will be negative. It doesn't count as a sign. Our quadratic formula here, it's on your star chart. So if you blank out when you're working on a test, don't worry, it is there for you. But that formula, the x values or the solutions, would be negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2 times a. And so if we've got these numbers for a, b, and c, we can plug them in there and that'll give us our solution. So looking at this, I have these this quadratic here, and I'm going to set it equal to 0 because setting it equal to 0 is what we do to find our solutions. 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. And so what I would normally do, multiply 2 and 3 and get 6 and kind of work it down from there and say, what do I have that could multiply to 6 and add to 7? And we could solve it from there. But we're using one that works out well to try out our quadratic formula on for the first time. So I need my 3 values. My a value is going to be a 2. B value is 7. And then my c value is 3. And so once I've identified those, then we're going to take and plug it into this quadratic formula. So it'll say x equals negative b, so a negative 7 plus or minus. So that just means we're going to get 2 solutions normally. We'll do this number minus whatever we get in the square root, and then plus whatever we get in the square root. The square root of b squared, so 7 squared. And it is important to put this in parentheses, because if you ever have a negative number and you type it into the calculator to square it, so if I did 7 squared, I get 49, no problem. But if I do negative 7 squared, then it pops up with a negative 49. The only problem with that is negative 7 times negative 7, which is what squaring it is, would be positive 49. So what happens in the calculator is it doesn't recognize this negative as being part of the 7. The fix for that is to always put it in parentheses. And if you do that, negative 7 squared, then it'll give you the right answer. So make sure to put parentheses. That way, if you've got to square it using the calculator, it works out for you. So 7 squared minus 4, and that 4 will always just be a 4, times a, which is 2, and c, which is 3. All of that is over 2 times a, which is 2. And so then we'll work to simplify this. So first off, I know I can do 7 squared to get 49. And so -7 plus or minus square root of 49 minus 4 times 2 times 3. So 8 times 3 or 4 times 6, either works. It ends up with 24. And all of that is over a 4. When I subtract that, 49 minus 24 is going to give me 25. So we end up with -7 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 4. And we could take the square root of 25, and that would give me a 5. So I would do, and this is where I'm going to split it up, -7 plus 5 over 4, or -7 minus 5 over 4. And solving that, -7 and 5 gives me a -2 over 4. So x is going to equal 1/2 for that one. -7 and -5 together gives me a -12 divided by 4. So x would equal a -3 there. And so we've used the formula. It has a couple steps to it, but that is something that works every single time for you. So I've gotten my answers there. Takes a little bit of work going through the steps, but it is all algebraic processes that we've gone over before. And we get our solutions there. So looking at one more, you will see them say x squared plus 2x equals -8. So I have a little bit of algebra I have to do there. I would have to get that -8 moved over to this side. So to do that, if I add 8 to both sides, then I get x squared plus 2x plus 8 equals 0. And then I can take and get my a, b, and c values. So a is going to equal, when there's no number in front of the x, a is just equal to 1. B is going to equal 2. And c is going to equal to 8. And so I'll plug that into my quadratic formula. It says x equals -b, so -2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 2 squared in parentheses, minus 4 times 1 times 8 over 2 times 1. And so when we work that out, 2 squared is 4. 4 minus 4 times 8 is 32. It's going to end up as a square root of -28. And so what I have here is taking a square root of a negative number. And if I were to try to do that, square root of -28, then I get an error because that negative there. And okay, I did it a minus sign, but still, There it goes. Gives me error, non-real answer. So that means I cannot take the square root of a negative number. So we'll say there's no real solutions. And if we were to put that on the graph, it would not cross the x-axis anywhere. So trying to take the square root of a negative number just means that you have a parabola that goes something like that and doesn't actually cross the x-axis. Okay, then let's talk real quick about the discriminant. So the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. You might recognize that as just this part on the inside here. And it's used to determine the number of real solutions of a quadratic. So if the discriminant is positive, then it's going to have two solutions. If it's 0, it has one solution. And if it's negative, it has no real solutions. So using that, what that basically means is I can just use the first part of it or that part inside the square root to decide how many solutions I'll end up with. So for this, a is negative 2, b is negative 8, and c equals negative 8. Just using the discriminant, I do negative 8 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times negative 8. Okay, and this is something we could put in the calculator. What I end up with is 64 minus negative 4, negative 2 is positive 8. Or so that'd be, it end up as a 64 there. And 64 minus 64 is 0. So when it's 0, I have one solution. Okay, so working those out, really it's just working out the first part of the quadratic formula. And the nice thing is about if you work out the discriminant first, so working out this one, I get the discriminant equals 121. And so it would have two solutions. When I know the discriminant's 121, if I'm solving it the rest of the way, I could just put a negative b, so 7 plus or minus the square root of 121 over 2 times a, which is 1, so over 2. And so figuring out that discriminant first really shortens down your equation because you've already worked out the bulk of the equation there. So you have a few examples down here using the quadratic formula to find the solution. I will go over a couple of those real quick and we'll go from there. And so looking at first one, I need to subtract 6 from both sides to give me 0 equals x squared plus x minus 6. So a is 1, b is 1, and c equals negative 6. So let's work out that discriminant first to make our lives a little easier. It is b squared, so 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 6. So I'd end up with 1, and then -4 and -6 gives me positive 24. So that would equal 25. Then I can just put in -1 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 2 times a, which is 1. And so I would have -1 square root of 25 would be 5. Sorry, you can't see that down there. And so I just worked out the discriminant first and got that. Then just use that to plug the number in there. So it's really doing the same thing as the full quadratic formula, just working it out in two separate pieces. So I'd have -1 plus 5 over 2, or -1 minus 5 over 2. Should give me positive 4 over 2, so x would equal 2, or x would equal -3. So we could write it as that. We could write it as the solution set or the ordered pairs. Last thing I'll show you here, when you have x squared minus 9, that's a difference of squares. One, this would be a lot easier to solve just using the difference of squares, but if you're doing your a, b, and c values, a is 1, b is going to be 0, and c will be -9. So then you can use those numbers, plug it into the formula, and you'll figure it out from there.